Hello there. This is Louis Almeida, the teacher and student and mentor regarding the ideas of Spinoza and Gurdjieff. Today, I'm going to ask you a question. What do you do with your tension when you feel tension? What do you do with feelings of anxiety? And how about feelings of stress? What do you do with your stress? I was listening to Dr. Gabor Mate. You probably heard of him. He's highly regarded. He has such insights about human nature. And he was a doctor, a medical doctor, but he began to study the causes of addiction. And he himself had an addiction, classical music. That sounds really nice, doesn't it? But it was so bad that he would began to forget his practice. He was uh, at a pediatric ward and had a patient, and she was taking a long time to deliver. So he said, I'll just take a walk outside and go to the music store. And he forgot about his patient. That's how his addiction is. He spent thousands and thousands of dollars buying the latest classical uh, recordings. What do you do with addiction? So he said this something wonderful. He said something like this: addiction is not the problem. Addiction could be drugs, alcohol, could be sex, could be food, could be shopping. There are many ways to uh, cause us to be addicted to something. What is addiction? Basically, it's desire, but that desire sometimes can be excessive and takes a lot of our time. So, and it could be a workaholic, and there might be say problems at home you don't want to face. You might not be talking to your children or your spouse or your friends. So I was watching this interview with Dr. Mate, and he was talking about these feelings of tension, anxiety, and stress, and about addiction. Why do we need addiction? He said, an addiction, again, is not the problem. The problem is the causes of tension, stress, and anxiety. And where do they come from? How do they begin? Where do they start? And he began to ask questions about the background of this young man who was interviewing Dr. Mate, because this young man was having a lot of questions about his own problems. And so Dr. Mate said, well, let's look at your background. When it began? And the young man said, oh, well, at the age of 4 or 5, what was the problem? His, the, the young man said, well, my father was a minister. And I feel I had to walk around him with eggshells. I could not really talk about myself. I couldn't talk about emotions, my feelings. I was, I feel I had to be a good boy. I had to be very mindful. I had to do the right thing. I should not cause problems. I had to be a good boy. And that is the problem. Our parents are supposed to be a parent. Now, you may have heard of Dr. Shivali. Dr. Shivali is a clinical therapist, a family therapist. She has a practice in New York. She's beautiful person and also attractive. She wrote a book called The Conscious Parent. Now, I have both these individuals on my website. Why? Because they complement the work that I do. They go into the problems of human nature. They just don't want to solve problems. They want to know the causes of them. The wonderful thing about Dr. Shivali, she says, in reality, parents are not conscious. They don't know what they're doing. And she herself was a parent, and she didn't know what to do. And what is the problem? our parents have these expectations, and it's so difficult to listen. It's so difficult to love and care. How to discipline without being angry. My own life, growing up was a disaster. I was afraid of my father. And all my siblings were afraid of our father. And so there was a lot of addiction in my family, drugs and alcohol and sex addictions. So we live a life of stress, tension, and anxiety. Why? Because we are not getting in touch with the problems. What about your background? What about your problems? You might be going to therapy. That's nice. But one thing about therapy, they might help you say, look at your problems and give you ideas how to deal with them. Or the problem might be you might have PTSD, a post-traumatic stress disorder. You might be come from a war zone, or you might be been attacked violently. You might have domestic violence. You might be in hijack. Your car been hijacked. But you notice when you were in high school, how stressful it was to try to belong and fit in. Or you might have been a loner, or you might have been highly intelligent, intellectual, and they call you a nerd, and yet you want to be part of a group. And what about the cafeteria when you were a student in high school? Going to going to a new school, being alone. What stress is that? Is trying to find a friend, trying to belong, stress, anxiety, tension, and we feel this in our body. What do you do with it? What is your story? That's why I wrote a book called, oh, this is my teacher's book, How to Solve Life's Problems. That's one of the books I recommend. Again, I met my teacher in 1970, and I've been doing this work for over 50 years. And in this book, there's one, chapter 36. Chapter 36, the need for direct self-approval. My teacher used his students and how to apply Spinoza and incorporate Spinoza into our lives. My teacher wrote a book. It was for students, and it was so good I decided to publish it. Some of you may have it. I'll read just a little part of it. He says this: the need for self-approval is innate in everyone's mind. The adequate attainment of self-approval gives us a sense of inner rightness, of peace, joy, fulfillment, and freedom. Doesn't that sound wonderful? If we do not come to adequate self-approval directly, then we are compelled to seek it indirectly from others. If we cannot get it approval from others, we try to obtain it from our imagination. The logic of indirect self-approval works in this way. If others affirm me, like me, admire me, adore me, look up to me, are in awe by me, praise me, I must be all right. As few individuals ever come to true self-approval, there is a mad scramble by people to get approval from others. But how to gain direct self-approval? Remember, self-approval is earned. So there are many essays in this book that help us learn about ourselves. But again, there's a problem. There's an old saying that you cannot put new wine in old bottles, that you cannot put new wine in old bottles. That is kind of an old biblical saying, I think. What does that mean? You cannot put new ideas in a mind that's comprised of already conditioned thinking, beliefs, and attitudes, self talk. Eckhart Tolle talked about self talk, the chatterbox, the mind that's always saying negative things about yourself. But those are memory patterns, patterns of thinking that are stored in the brain. The brain is the storehouse of memory. The brain is an organ. The mind is something else. The mind is not the brain. The mind is a thinking thing. So the work that I do is how to look at your mind, understand that you have a mind. And that's what I learned from my teacher. I'm so grateful for my teacher. He showed me that I had a mind. He explained to me that I had a mind, that my mind can be improved upon, that I can come to new ideas and new thinking different from my pre-programmed nature. We're all pre-programmed. And that's why this young man that was interviewing Dr. Mattei was pre-programmed. He was around his father, and his father was a minister. And he had to be very careful with what he said, what he did. So he always wanted to be a good boy. He wanted to get his father's approval. But how do you get your own approval? And that's what the work I do is how to gain self-approval. I've come to my own self-approval. All my life, I was seeking approval from others, and I lived in fear. So tension, anxiety, and stress is a physical expression of fear, of doubt, of uncertainty. We don't know how the people are going to respond. We want desperately to get approval from others. How can we get approval from ourselves? And that's the work. The work, and that's why I published another book. Where's my book? I can't find it. Where's it? It was just here. Oh, here it is. Sorry about that. I've decided to publish a book to help my students understand what we're doing. And this book is about case studies about how to understand Spinoza and Gurdjieff, because again, their language is so difficult. How can you come to new ideas when your mind is already filled with preconditioned thinking? You must learn how to open up your mind. As this young man began to ask Dr. Mattei questions about tension, stress, and anxiety. To look at your mind, you must learn how to look at yourself without judgment. How do you do that? Well, you can't do it yourself. I have many, many videos. And you can go on TikTok. I have a lot of videos on TikTok. It's free. You can go on podcast, on my podcast, my videos on YouTube, free. Or you can go to Patreon. And on Patreon, you just pay $5 and you have an array of videos, over 60 videos. And they're easy accessible. $5. And some of them are free, and you don't even have to pay $5. The work that I do is to help you understand yourself, for you to come to your own self-approval and overcome and acknowledge the stress, acknowledge the tension, acknowledge the anxiety. Those are symptoms of a problem that you have. If you don't address these problems, then we become addicted to the things that cover up the stress. All our addictions, food, sex, music, shopaholics, workaholics, alcohol, drugs, they're there and they're not the problem. Alcohol is not the problem. Addiction is our way to solve a problem. The addiction is not the issue. The issue is a problem that we're not able to face. See, I was learning something from Dr. Mattei Gabor today, Dr. Gabor Mattei. Again, Dr. Gabor Mattei compliments the work that I do because he digs deeply into human nature. But you cannot do this on your own. That's the problem. See, we don't realize that we have an ego nature. Well, we talk about, you may know it a little bit about it, but the ego nature resists change. The ego nature believes it knows. Think about Elon Musk. That man is brilliant, creative. He says he gets probably 4 or 5 hours sleep a night, and he's always working. He wants his workers to do what he's doing. He doesn't have lunch. If his lunch is it's always eating while he's working on ideas. He cannot relax. Talk about tension, anxiety, stress. That man is in that state all the time. Why? Because he does not know himself. And that's a problem with all these successful, highly intellectual people. They're good at doing things, creating things in the material world, but the psychological, emotional area, totally blind. And there's a problem. The ego nature believes that we have free will, that we have free choice. Spinoza, a 17th century philosopher, wrote his ethics. His ethics was banned, and it was rediscovered after his death, 200 years after his death. And today, Spinoza is looked upon as the go-to guy as far as philosophy, and it was said that he was the father of psychotherapy because he looked at human nature in a depth that nobody has ever. He uses mathematics. I would say Spinoza's philosophy includes science, medicine, psychology, and philosophy. I was so grateful to my teacher introducing me to Spinoza and Gurdjieff. Gurdjieff is a great introduction to the problems we have. Many of my students started off with Gurdjieff. They were involved in Gurdjieff groups, but they came to me saying, Gurdjieff groups, they never got into their emotions, and they realized they were missing something because in the emotions is where growth is possible. And that's why I wrote my book. And my book explains exactly how to get in touch with your emotions. Because you must have a journal. We are all triggered. When you are anxious, anxiety, it's triggered by something. What caused it? When you feel tension, what is the tension? What triggered the tension? And when you feel stress, what causes the stress? See, tension, stress, and anxiety, they're all necessary in helping us realize that how we are doing in life. If you are doubtful, fearful, and because your thinking is confused, and that's where I'll help you understand how to look at your thoughts, how to overcome fear, how to come to clarity. So look at my videos. You'll find some answers there, or give me a call. You're very welcome. I hope you got something from this. I sure did. And that's why I love this work, because I'm going to be 83 in August. And my goal is to live 113. Why? I don't know. I think I do know. I do know. Because I love this work, and I want to continue to grow by sharing with you what I understand so you can live a life with meaning and purpose. Bye for now.